where we study the Parsha on a daily basis, hence the name, Daily Power Parsha. All right, muting everybody just to get the clean background. At any point, you can jump right in. I'm going to share also my screen with you because, number one, sharing is caring, and number two, we have a lot to talk about. If you recall last time, that's weird. If you recall last time we studied together, we studied the fourth and fifth readings, but we didn't finish the fifth reading. Remember we ended up with the story of Dinah? Yes? Okay. So, and we learned about the terrible assault that was committed against her. We read about the offer of Shechem and his father, Chamar, to kind of, we all live together, Kumbaya, and then the deception of Shimon and Levi, and they're destroying the city. Okay, we read about that and how their father Jacob was unhappy about the extent that they went to protect their sister, and they said, "What, we should let her be treated like this?" Not happening. Okay, that was that story, and that's how that ended. We're going to pick it up, Genesis chapter 35. Here we go, verse 1. So this is still fifth reading, but it's toward the end of it, and we're going to go into the sixth reading and seventh readings and kind of wrap up the Torah portion. Here we go. And God said to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Bethel and abide there and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." If you recall, this Bethel place was the place where he slept that night with the ladder and the dream. Remember that? With the dream and the ladder? With the angels going up and down? And he made a monument there. He called it Bethel. Boom. God says, go back there. Thereupon Jacob Jacob said to his household and to all those who were with him, remove, wow, look at this. Look at this line. Remove the deities of the foreign nations, which are in your midst. Take away the idols. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. And you might be wondering, why did they have idols? And the answer is because, remember, Shimon and Levi, they had just wiped out that city of Shechem, and they took all the possessions. So they ended up with tchotchkes, like little idol keychains, and the stuff that you hang in the car, like in the fuzzy dice idol things, whatever. So Jacob said, get rid of all that stuff. Purify yourselves, change your clothes. All right. And we will arise and go up to Bethel. And I will make an altar to the God who answered me on the day of my distress and was with me on the way that I went. I love that. I love the way that Yaakov describes Hashem's protection, right? So he says, I want to thank God who answered me on the day of my distress, whether it was with Laban or with Esau, either way, whatever that intention is. And he was with me on the way that I went. And they gave Jacob all the deities of the nations that were in their possession and the earrings that were in their ears. And Jacob hid them under the terebinth that was near Shechem. Do we know what a terebinth is? I know what a terabyte is, but that's something else. What's a terebinth? All right, we don't know. Fine. Let me see something. Let me find another translation here. Give me a minute. Oh.
It's a tree.
Tree. Yeah. Huh. It's a non-fruit bearing tree. So they hid the idols under a tree. All right. By the way, I happen to have the treasure map with an X marks the spot in case you want to find it. Joking. Seriously, guys. Joking. Okay. Next, verse 5. Then they traveled, and the fear of God was upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue Jacob's sons. Remember, they had just wiped out a city, essentially, but God's fear was upon them, the other people around them, so they did not try to take revenge against Jacob's sons. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in the land of Canaan, that is Bethel. I told you last time they used to be called losers, but now they became Beth Ellers. We talked about this last time, right? So he came to that place, and all the people who were with him, he built there an altar, and he called the place Beth El. Sorry, he called the place El Beth El. Aha, little plot twist here. It was Beth El, now it's El Beth El. For there God had been revealed to him when he fled from before his brother Esau. Okay, fine. Now we get to another piece of the story. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel, beneath the plain. So he named it Alon Bachus, or Bachut, which means the plain of tears, because Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, passed away. Okay. And God, let's continue. And God appeared again to Jacob when he came from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. And he named him Israel. Now you might be wondering, didn't Jacob's name already get changed? The answer is yes. But who changed Jacob's name the last time? The angel. Remember when they were wrestling? And he was holding on to him, and the angel said, let me go. He says, no, bless me. Okay, your name is no longer Jacob, but Israel. Okay, at this point, now that was before the encounter between Jacob and Esau. So that happened. And then the story with Dinah happened. And other travels happened. And finally here, God says, I agree with the angel. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel is your name. And he named him Israel. By the way, it still didn't stick. He still called Jacob plenty in Torah, because I told you already, according to Kabbalah, you have two personas that are both simultaneously present, ever present. 11, verse 11, and God said to him, to Jacob / Israel, I am the Almighty God. Be fruitful and multiply. You're talking to a guy with 12 kids, but whatever. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a multitude of nations shall come into existence from you, and kings shall come forth from your loins. In other words, you will be the father of many. Let's continue. Reading number 6. And God continues, and the land that I gave to Abraham and to Isaac, I will give to you, and to your seed after you will I give the land. And I've told you this from the beginning, from the Torah portion of Lech Lecha, when we were first introduced to Abraham and God's blessings to Abraham. You have two blessings that always come together: the blessing of the land and the blessing of children. They're always connected. So at the end of, I'm just going to go back to what we just did. The end of the 5th reading, what does God do? God gives Jacob a blessing of children, right? Fruitful and multiply, many nations shall come into existence from you, kings shall come forth from your loins. In other words, have children, be fruitful and multiply. And that blessing is always coupled with the blessing of the land, which is the very next verse, the beginning of reading number 6. God promises the land to Jacob, the same land that he promised to Abraham and to Jacob, and to Isaac, he's giving to Jacob. By the way, he says the land that I gave, right? Gave, not promised, but gave, because a promise by God is already essentially giving it. All right, let's continue. And God went up with him, with Jacob, in the place where he had spoken with him. Now, Jacob, you see how the Torah uses Jacob even after God officially, formally changed his name to Israel. Now, Jacob had erected a monument in the place where he had spoken with him, a stone monument. And he poured now a libation upon it, and then he poured oil upon it. So he created a stone monument, created essentially like an altar type thing. He poured a libation. Doesn't say what kind of libation. He poured some sort of pouring. Wine, maybe oil, wine, or maybe probably wine. And then he poured oil upon it on top of that. Jacob named the place where God had spoken with him, again, Bethel. Okay, all of this is stuff that we know essentially. It's just different parts of the story, but it's all the same place, the same idea of the gratitude and the blessings and the altar, the monument, and Bethel. Let's continue verse 16. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was still some distance to come to Ephrath. And Rachel gave birth. and her labor was difficult. Remember, Rachel had one son. His name was Joseph. She is pregnant again. She gives birth, but it's a difficult labor. It came to pass when she had such difficulty giving birth that the midwife said to her, "Do not be afraid, for this one too is a son for you." In other words, yes. Okay, remember the wives had a prophecy that there would be 12 sons, 12 tribes, which is why Leah prayed that her seventh child should not be a girl, should not be a boy, but should be a girl, so that her sister Rachel could have two boys. So when Rachel is now giving birth, this is before sonograms, etc. So the midwife said, don't worry, or don't be distressed. It's good news. This is your second son. This is the last of the 12 tribes. Verse 18. But she did not live through this. And it came to pass when her soul departed, for she died while giving birth, that she named him Ben-Oni. But his father called him Benjamin. So what happens is that Rachel dies, essentially in or right after, shortly after giving birth to Benjamin. So she calls him Ben-Oni, which means the son of my pain. His father calls him Binyamin, which means the son of my right side, because I guess where they were traveling was to the right side of where they were before. It was, I don't know. It was based on the travels. But it's interesting. The mother calls him the name based on her pain, and the father has another calculation. So this is the first time that we find that any of the tribes, any of the names of these sons, there's a distinction. There's two versions, the mother's version and the father's version. And here the name sticks with the father's version, Benjamin. So Rachel died, and she was buried on the road to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. And Jacob erected a monument on her grave. That is the tombstone of Rachel until this day. So the tomb of Rachel is in Bethlehem, and it's there till today. So you should know that Rachel is the only one of the matriarchs and patriarchs that's not buried in the cave of Machpelah.
Is it possible that Benjamin, the son of his right, maybe that was the son of his Rachel, because she was his right?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't read that anywhere. I'm just guessing.
No, it could be. It could be. I think on a literal level, it means something about the geography. Maybe even Rashi has something on it. We can toggle it. But I like what you're saying, which is, my beloved's. So let's not name him for all time, reminding about the loss, but about her life, right? Because the name Ben-Oni would be the son of my pain, and forever he would be called by the trauma and the tragedy, whereas here he's being called by the blessing. I like that. I like that angle. Yeah. Rachel is the only matriarch not buried in the cave of Machpelah. It's interesting. It's interesting. Why that's so. On a practical level, there was only room for two, Jacob and one other. It went to Leah. He married her first. But why not Rachel if she was always his beloved? So our sages tell us that Rachel actually requested, on some level, Jacob knew also this, that she wanted to be buried on the road. Not in the cave of Machpelah, not in Hebron, but on the road to Ephrat. Because later on in history, as the Jewish people were being exiled, with the destruction of the first temple, being led away in chains, taken as captives and slaves, the Jewish people were crying to God for mercy. Rachel, on the side of the road, also prayed to God. And our sages tell us that everyone prayed. Abraham prayed, and Isaac prayed, and Jacob prayed for the Jewish people. This is, again, 1,000 years later in history. All the patriarchs prayed to no avail. The matriarchs prayed, but to no avail. And then Rachel prays. She's on the side of the road. She's with her kids. She's with the Jewish people. And there she says a prayer to God, and she formulates it like this: She says, God, I was able to overlook my pride when I gave my secret signs to my sister Leah to let her marry the man who was to be my husband. Even though someone else was going to marry my husband, I relinquished my pride. I swallowed my pride. She says, God, you also swallow your pride. Yes, your people have been unfaithful. Your people have adopted, foreign worship, serving idols. But if I can swallow my pride, you can swallow your pride. And God says, again, this is a medrash. God says to Rachel, to your prayers I will listen. And because of your prayers, I promise that even though they're being exiled now, I will bring them back. I'll bring them back to their land, back to their temple, and there will be a better time in the future. That's the power of Rachel and Rachel's prayers. By the way, you should know that this burying her on the side of the road caused caused a little bit of friction that only plays out, only is revealed years later, decades later. When Jacob is on his deathbed, this is when the families moved to Egypt because of Joseph, right? And that whole drama, which we haven't yet discussed. So when Jacob is on his deathbed in Egypt, he calls over Joseph, the viceroy, and he says, you got to promise that you're going to take me when I pass away back to the cave. And then he says, I know that I didn't do the same for your mother, but do it for me. He says, I know you might be thinking, I should take you all the way from Egypt and bury you in the cave of Machpelah. My mother, Rachel, you didn't do that to. You left her on the side of the road. I mean, not left her, but you buried her on the side of the road. Yaakov says it was for a purpose. It was for an intention. And the way our sages explain it was what I just told you before. It was in order to pray for the exiles as they were being taken away. Just to tell you, maybe to read a line here. I'm going to read to you. This is from the Chumash later on. Jacob is speaking to Joseph shortly before Jacob's passing. I know you are angry with me because when I was coming from Padan and Rachel died on me while traveling through the land of Canaan, when there was still about a half-mile stretch of land to reach Ephrat, right? I know you're angry with me and you're upset that I buried her there on the way to Ephrat and Bethlehem. But you shouldn't be upset, he says, because God told me to bury her there. So that's what Jacob says. But Jacob buried Rachel right there on the side of the road. All right. But it was for a divine purpose, and ultimately it played out that she was able to secure God's promise for redemption. Let's continue verse 21. By the way, that is the ultimate Jewish mother, right? Sacrificing her comfort for her kids, right? If you think about it. She says, you know what? I'm okay. I'll stay here because when my kids come by, I'm going to be davening for them. I want to be close to them, even in their saddest, darkest, most painful moments. That's a Jewish mother, right? It's not about how I feel. It's about the mishpacha. Okay. It's like, how many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? Don't worry about me. I'll sit in the dark. It's fine, right? That's the joke. But listen, every joke has some truth. Okay. Verse 21, Israel journeyed. First time he's referred to as Israel. Israel, Jacob journeyed, and he pitched his tent at some distance past the tower of Eder. And it came to pass when Israel sojourned in that land that Reuben went out. Wow. Reuben went out and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine. And Israel heard of it. And so the sons of Jacob were 12. Very obscure, vague verse is verse 22. What does it mean that Reuben, the firstborn son, went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine? Remember, Bilhah was the maidservant, was the handmaid of Leah, one of the mothers of the 12 tribes. She had two of the sons. So Reuben, Leah's son, went and lay with Bilhah. I'm sorry, Bilhah was, I'm sorry. Bilhah was Rachel's handmaid. So it says Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, and his father heard of it. Our sages tell us that's not what happened. He didn't sleep with Bilhah. Here's what happened. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you. Essentially, Jacob's primary bed, if you will, was with Rachel, in Rachel's tent. When Rachel passed away, Jacob moved his bed from Rachel's tent to Bilhah's tent, her handmaid. And Reuben said, I find that to be offensive to my mother. Because instead of moving from Rachel, when Rachel passes away, to the sister Leah, you went from Rachel to her handmaid, and my mother Leah is still being the one that's disrespected. So he went, and he physically went and took his father's bed and dragged it from Bilhah's tent to his mother Leah's tent. That's what it means that he lay with Bilhah. Not that Reuben actually was intimate with her, but that he was kind of messing around with the intimacy of Bilhah by moving his father's bed from Bilhah's tent to his mother Leah's tent. Does that make sense what I'm saying in the story? Yeah, he was protecting the honor of his mother. But nonetheless, Jacob ultimately tells him, that's not your place. You don't get involved in the parents in your parents in the bedroom life. That's not your place. So I understand your feelings, but it's not cool. But the Torah is very, very quick to let us know that Reuben was not cut off from the family, because it says, and so the sons of Jacob were 12. In other words, Reuben was still the son, was still the firstborn. So now, despite the fact of what Reuben did by, quote, laying with Bilhah, by so-called laying with Bilhah, but not really, but moving his father's bed, nonetheless, there were 12 sons. He remained the son. And the Torah enumerates the sons of Leah were Reuben, Jacob's firstborn. And it calls him Jacob's firstborn. Even after this indiscretion, it still calls Reuben Jacob's firstborn, to let us know that he still loved him. Shimon, Simeon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant. Remember I told you that Jacob moved his bed from Rachel to Bilhah's tent. Okay, and that's what made Reuben upset. Okay, the sons of Bilhah were Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah were Gad and Asher. These are Jacob's sons who were born to him in Padan Aram by Laban. And Jacob came to his father Isaac to Mamre, Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac dwelt. The days of Isaac, getting back to Isaac, he lived 180 years. And Isaac expired and died and was gathered into his peoples, old and sated with days. And his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. Okay, so now we have the passing of Isaac. Isaac passes away, he's buried by his sons Esau and Jacob. I don't know that I'm going to read this inside, this next section, because it's telling us about the family tree of Esau, which is Edom. Talks about his wives, Ada, Basmat, Eliphaz, Basmat, Ada, Oholibama, and Basmat. Those were his three wives. Remember, he had two wives from the Canaanites and a third wife from Ishmael when he heard that his father wants him to marry from the family. So he took a third wife, but didn't divorce the first two. Okay. And then it just gives us the family tree. Actually, here's one verse two verses that I want to do. Esau took his wives, his sons and his daughters, and all the people of his household, and his cattle and all his animals, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan. And he went to another land because of his brother Jacob. For their possessions were too numerous for them to dwell together, and the land of their sojournings could not support them because of their livestock. So essentially, they decided ultimately to kind of part ways and to live in separate places because they each had a lot of animals and they needed space. They needed to live in the Midwest where there's a lot of space to raise animals. That's what they tell me. All right, let's continue. Now, this is the family tree. These are the generations of Esau, his sons, Eliphaz, Reuel. Yeah, you get the whole family tree here. If you want to be proficient in the genealogy of Esau, you got it. Okay, let's continue the 7th reading. It also talks about the genealogy of Esau's family. Again, it's all the family, the family of Esau. Yep. And it concludes, the Torah portion concludes with, these are the chieftains of Edom, according to their dwelling place in the land of their possession. That is Esau, progenitor of the Edomites. Essentially, what the Torah is doing is, it's kind of wrapping up Esau's family, because henceforth, we're only going to be talking about Jacob's family in Torah, right? Torah is closing out the Esau-Jacob duality of the twins by telling us Esau's family, done. And now we pick up the story with Jacob's family and Joseph and his kids and all the drama and Egypt, and then the Jewish people and the Exodus and all the rest of the stuff will focus exclusively on the family of Jacob. So the Torah kind of gets this out of the way before getting into the rest of the story with Jacob and his family. One thing to note that Kabbalah notes is that you always have, positive energy balanced out by negative energy. And so you have, chiefs and princes and kings on Esau's side. And you also have, of course, on Jacob's side. And it's kind of like a balancing act. You're always going to have two sides. Let's see if there's a Rashi here. Look at this. It talks about his descendants being inhabitants of the land. They were its inhabitants, says Rashi, before Esau came there. I'm sorry, these were inhabitants that were there before Esau came there. Our rabbis explained that they were called inhabitants of the land because they were skilled in making the land habitable. They would say the length of this measuring stick is good for planting olives. Sorry, the length of this measuring stick is good for planting olives. The length of this measuring stick is good for planting grapevines. For they would taste the soil and know what was suitable to plant in it. It's amazing. They would taste the soil and know what to plant in it. We have the person who first created mules, mating a donkey with a mare. Who would have thought? Yeah. Yeah. Remember I told you about balancing between the positive and negative energy. So the Torah tells us about the kings of Esau's family. Rashi says there were 8. And corresponding to them, Jacob set up 8 kings and nullified the kingdom of Esau during their time. So here are the following 8 Jewish kings: Saul, Ishbosheth, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, and Jehoshaphat.
Where do they come from, Rabbi?
They all came from Esau's family. Where did they live? They lived in...
I meant genealogically, yeah. Oh, Esau's family.
All Esau's family, exactly. Oh, no, sorry. These people that we just mentioned, Saul, these were Jewish kings. So these and Rashi mentions the 8 Jewish kings that corresponded to these 8 ancient Esau kings, right?
So how does Jacob know them?
No, Jacob didn't know them. Rashi's telling us that the Torah is mentioning the kings of Esau's family, because later on in history, the Jews will also have 8 kings. So you have 8 corresponding to 8. And interestingly enough, Rashi points out during the days of his son, Yehoshaphat's son, Yoram, it's written, in his days, Edom revolted from under the power of Judah. Remember the prophecy that one son, they're twins, and one will, when one rises, the other will fall. Remember Rebecca was told that she has two twins in her, she has twins, and when one rises, the other will fall, and vice versa. So the Torah is telling us essentially that there were 8 Edomite kings, then there were 8 Jewish kings, and then Rashi points out, after the 8 Jewish kings, Edom revolted. And so again, you have this power struggle, this back and forth power struggle that exists throughout history of their kings, our kings, Edom's kings, Jewish kings, and the struggle is a perpetual struggle. Hope that makes sense. It talks about a girl named who's called Matred, the daughter of Mezahav. Mezahav means what is gold, which means this guy was so rich that gold was of no importance to him. He's like, what's gold anyway? He's got so much wealth. Anyway, that's it. It kind of ends. Magdiel, one final Rashi. Chief, it talks about different chiefs of the family, of Esau's family. It says Chief Magdiel. So Rashi says Magdiel, this is Rome. There you go. The Edomites, Esau's family is associated with Rome. When in Rome, visit the Edomites. All right, so what's the bottom line? What's the moral of the story? Again, the Torah portion ends with a lot of discussion about Esau's family tree and the kings and the chieftains and whatever. Maybe I'm sure there are lessons that we can learn from there. But getting back to what we learned before then, I think the story of Rachel, Jacob's beloved Rachel, being buried on the side of the road in order to be a blessing for her children, I think is important. Again, it's the word sacrifice is a dirty word. I mean, who wants to sacrifice? That sounds like we should be living for ourselves and our own happiness. But nonetheless, there is this notion of maybe giving up our own comforts for the benefit of another. And Rachel, the Jewish mama, teaches us the importance of sometimes giving up the comfort in order to be there for those that are in need. May we all be there for others as we get ourselves ready for a very special Shabbat, the Shabbat of the 19th of Kislev, the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus. Let's all remember that at the core of Judaism and of Hasidic teachings is the notion of being there for others and loving our fellow as ourselves. It's the golden rule. It's really the rule. It's the entirety of Torah, as Hill told the fellow who wanted to convert to Judaism. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go learn. So as we enter Shabbat, let's remember the importance of maybe giving up something of ourselves if it's what's needed to help out someone else. Let's be generous with our giving of our time, of our money, of our resources to help others in need. All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And it's great to study together.
Shabbat Shalom.
Awesome.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Ray. Shabbat Shalom, Donna, Stan, Joy, Mark. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Oh, don't forget one more thing. Sorry. Sunday night, Fireside Chat is brought back. We have Fireside Chat Hanukkah edition. Remember Fireside Chats back in the day when COVID was first a thing? We have Fireside Chats, Fireside Chat Hanukkah edition, 2 sessions, 8 p.m. Sunday. The link is in the email that you should have received. Another email will go out Sunday morning. You can check it out on Facebook or on our webpage, intownjewishacademy.org. Join us live. It's open to the whole community. Log in and get into the spirit of the holiday. All right. See you later. Take care. Shabbat Shalom.